Hello and welcome to grammar class. Today's lesson is the complex sentence in English grammar. But first understand the difference between a sentence and a clause in English grammar. A sentence is a set of words that makes a complete sense. A sentence consists of a subject and a predicate. On the other hand, a clause is a part of a sentence that has its own subject and predicate. For example, John did not go to school is a sentence with the subject John and the predicate did not go to school. But in the next sentence, John did not go to school because he was unwell. There are two clauses with their own subjects and predicates. John did not go to school and because he was unwell. Now see a couple of sentences and their clauses on your screen. I like tea but she likes coffee. In this sentence, I like tea is the first clause and she likes coffee is the second clause. And in the second sentence, if you read is the first clause, you will learn is the second clause. And you will notice that all the four clauses in these two sentences have their own subjects and predicates. Now we know that a sentence may have two or more clauses, each with their own subject and predicate. And if a clause makes a good and clear sense by itself, it's called an independent or principal or main clause. On the contrary, if a clause does not make a clear or good sense by itself, it's called a subordinate or dependent clause. Remember, a subordinate clause cannot stand by itself or alone. It depends on the principal clause to make the meaning clear. In short, a principal clause makes a clear sense by itself, but a subordinate clause depends on the principal clause for the completion of meaning. Now let's understand the complex sentence. A complex sentence is made up of one principal clause and one or more subordinate clauses linked by either subordinating conjunctions or relative pronouns or relative adverbs. In other words, a complex sentence has one principal clause and one or more subordinate clauses introduced by a subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun or relative adverb. Now see some examples of complex sentences on your screen. If you work hard, you will succeed. Here the first clause, if you work hard, does not make a complete or clear sense. It depends on the second clause for the completion of meaning. So it's a subordinate clause. However, the second clause, you will succeed, makes a clear sense by itself. It can stand alone, hence it's an independent or principal clause. And if is the subordinating conjunction of this complex sentence. In the second sentence, the first clause, I went out, is the principal clause, and the second clause, when the rain stopped, is the subordinate clause. When is the subordinating conjunction. In the third sentence, he said is the principal clause, that he wanted to take rest is the subordinate clause, and that is the subordinating conjunction. However, the fourth sentence has a different structure. Here, the underlined part, who won the prize, is the subordinate clause. The girl is my sister is the principal clause, and who is the relative pronoun. And in the last sentence, the first clause, he will die, is the principal clause. The second clause, before he surrenders, is the subordinate clause, and before is the subordinating conjunction. So it's clear that a complex sentence consists of a principal clause and one or more subordinate or dependent clauses joined by a subordinating conjunction. And it is extremely important to note, as you can see in all these examples, that in a complex sentence, the subordinate clause may come either before or after the main clause. I mean, the subordinate clause may come at the beginning or in the middle of the sentence, but it always starts with a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. So now the question arises, how do you identify a complex sentence in English grammar? Well, if you see any of the following subordinating conjunctions or relative pronouns or relative adverbs in the sentence, you know that it's a complex sentence. Now, this is the list of subordinating conjunctions, relative pronouns, and relative adverbs. What, where, why, when, how, whom or who, whose, which, whether, if, provided, as if, as though, after, before, since, until, unless, lest, that, in that, than, for, though, although, so that, as soon as long as far as, etc. So now it is super easy. If you find any of these words introducing or starting a clause in the sentence, it will be a subordinate clause, and if there is a subordinate clause, it will be a complex sentence for sure. So remember, these words are always used in complex sentences. In English grammar, subordinate clauses are of three types: noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. If the subordinate clause does the work of a noun in the sentence, it's called a noun clause. And if the subordinate clause functions as an adjective in the sentence, it's called an adjective clause. Similarly, an adverb clause does the work of an adverb in the sentence. Now see some examples of different types of subordinate clauses. He asked me whether I knew him. Here, whether I knew him is the subordinate clause, and it functions as a noun or object to the verb asked, so it's a noun clause. In the second sentence, I have a friend who lives in Russia. Here, who lives in Russia is the subordinate clause which describes a noun friend, so it's an adjective clause. Next, though he is rich, he is not happy. Here, the first clause, though he is rich, is a subordinate clause. It is expressing a sense of contrast in the statement, hence, it's an adverb clause of contrast. And in the last example, wait here until I return. Until I return is the subordinate clause. Until is the subordinating conjunction. Here it's showing the time of my return, so it's an adverb clause of time. So that brings us to the end of today's class on the complex sentence in English grammar. If you liked the video, please do consider subscribing to my channel and press the notification bell for more grammar videos like this. Thank you so much.